In this lesson, you'll learn about enhancements made to task types used by Worklog Manager in version 5.9. Let's start with the change in how AutoWorker uses transaction codes to complete tasks. From within System Master Files, click Transaction Codes. I'll double-click the first transaction code for you. In prior versions, AutoWorker could only write off small balances using transaction codes with a negative sign type, so the balance could be reduced to 0. If the wrong transaction code was selected, the balance wasn't guaranteed to be written off. As of 5.9, AutoWorker could now write off small balances using transaction codes with a positive sign type as long as the Allow Sign Override setting is enabled. If Allow Sign Override is not enabled, the code will not be available for selection on the AutoWorker tab in TasksTypes. Click Cancel. With this new functionality, you could use just a single transaction code to write off small balances and credit balances, but be sure to consider how that would impact your reports before doing that. Now, let's explore the 3 new task types that were added. Click Close. Click Task Types. Let's look at the first task type, which is set up to write off a small credit balance at the account level. I'll double-click it. Click the Auto Creation tab. A new auto creation action has been added to write off account credit balances in 5.9. To find it, click here. Here it is. Let's look at it in detail. I'll right-click it for you. Click Open. From here, you'll set the parameters that must be met in order for a task to be considered for creation. The first parameter, days old, can be any value from 0 to 5,000. Parameter 2 is the date that will be considered for the aging of parameter 1 and is required. Parameters 3 and 4 are where you set the credit balance range. Because this task deals with credit balances, parameter 3 must be less than the value in parameter 4. We won't make any changes, so click Cancel. Note the third-party balance is hard-coded to 0. If there's a third-party balance of something other than 0 on any of the encounters in the account, a task will be created. Time to move to the AutoWorker tab. Go ahead and click it. I'll right-click the AutoWorker action for you. Click Open. Click the drop-down arrow. Only transaction codes that would result in a positive adjustment to write off the credit balance display here. Click Account Credit Write-Off, Positive Sign, Allow Sign Override. Click OK. There is logic behind the scenes that determines if a task will be created. Let's look at that next. Certain conditions must be met in order for an account small credit balance task to be created. This flowchart explains the logic. If an account with a credit balance has no unapplied credits and no unposted transactions, then a task may be created. The logic will continue down the path, and if the criteria are met, then a task will be created. Let's look at a couple of examples in Next-Gen Practice Management. The task update was run, and there are 5 transactions in the AutoWorker write-off batch. Let's look at the ledger. I'll right-click it. Click Ledger. One of the accounts that matched the criteria for small balance write-offs for accounts was Julie Long's. Let's look at her account. I'll double-click the completed task to open the Edit Task window. Click the Auto Create tab. Here you see the task type parameters that were met, why this encounter qualified, and the action the AutoWorker performed. Click Cancel. What would happen if her transaction is deleted from the batch? Let's see. I'll delete her transaction and refresh her account window. The task has been completely removed like it never happened. The next time the nightly process runs, another write-off task will be created. Now, let's look at the new auto creation action for encounters. The highlighted action is the new one. It's designed to write off a patient credit balance at the encounter level if the third-party balance equals 0. Let's look at the task creation logic for this action. Just like the logic for creating tasks to write off account credit balances, there are rules for creating a task to write off patient credit balances. This flowchart explains this logic. As you work through the flow, if an encounter has both debit and credit values, no task will be created. If all the rules are met, including all charges for an encounter meeting the defined date criteria, then a task will be created. If you have AutoWorker set up with an appropriate transaction code to bring the balance to 0, the task will also be completed. Let's look at another example in Next-Gen Practice Management. Here's an encounter with a patient credit balance. Why wasn't a task created and the balance written off? Because according to the logic, a task won't be created if the third-party balance doesn't equal 0. Let's look at third-party credits next. A new auto creation action has also been added for third-party credit balances. In this case, the patient balance equals 0 and is hard-coded. The rest of the rules are geared towards what third-party conditions would merit a task to be created. Click the AutoWorker tab. Once again, if all the rules are met, a task is created, and an appropriate transaction code is selected here, the AutoWorker will complete the task by writing off the credit. Let's look at the rules for third-party credit write-offs. Again, you see the rules that are applied when considering if a task should be created for a third-party small credit balance write-off. That's it. You should now be familiar with the enhancements made to transaction codes used by AutoWorker, the 3 new auto creation actions, and the logic for how tasks are created for them.